Do you think that parents who let their kids skip school should have the benefits cut? Joining me now is Ryan Shorthouse, who's Chief Executive of Conservative think tank Bright Blue, and Devon Galani, who's Director of Policy in Practice. I will start with you, Ryan. Do you think if kids skip school, their parents should have their benefits cut?
Yes, I do. I think, it's the ultimate responsibility of parents to make sure their children are getting a good education. And the evidence of these sorts of conditional cash transfers from government in Latin American countries and European countries is that they're quite effective in boosting school attendance rates. And that's really what we want, children to be benefiting from education. So I do think it's a good idea, yeah.
Devon, do you think that parents whose kids skip school should have their benefits slashed?
No, I don't think it is. We're not in Latin America. I think the vast majority of kids get a great education. If children aren't going in there, you need to understand what's stopping that from happening. It might be an issue with a family, in which case, how does taking money away from that family help? Probably there are other routes. And when the work we do with local authorities on the front line, is that what people need is some help and support to make sure their behaviour changes. Otherwise, you're just putting them deeper into debt, putting them deeper into financial crisis, and not really doing anything about the source of the problem. What you want is those kids going into school, and taking money away doesn't necessarily help.
Ryan, how do you respond to that? I mean, not every single parent has been up all night, playing Xbox on the strong lager and not looking after their kids. Some of them will just not maybe be able to get a particularly needy child into school. How would you respond to that?
Well, look, I don't think being on a very low income, even though that's really tough for many families, is an excuse for not making sure that your child is going to school. In fact, I think most people on very low incomes would be offended by the assertion that somehow being on a low income, being in poverty, is stopping them from making sure their children are going to school. That, at the end of the day, this is about persistent truancy. So if the child is persistently missing school, and a parent is the person who is ultimately responsible for making sure that their child goes to school. So I think there should be this threat, this financial penalty, if the child doesn't go to school. And as I say, there's evidence not only in Latin America, but in European countries that this is proven effective at changing behaviour, which is what we want.
Devon, if it is about persistent... All right, go on, actually, you take it away, go on.
Just to be clear, I wasn't saying for a second that being in poverty is an excuse for I'm saying what you're doing is you're putting families deeper into poverty without kind of tackling the problem that's going to solve it, which is helping their kids get into school. I think
if it is a problem, Devon, I'll just come in because I want to ask you something specific on this. If it is a problem, actually, of persistent truancy, so it's not that maybe some child has got quite severe needs, say autism or something, and that can pose massive difficulties in the home, of course. And not every day there the parent would necessarily be directly to blame. But weeks at a time, and the kid's not going to school. Okay, well, what else can you do? I'm not sure that family needs help. Some would say they do need a bit of punishment if they're on benefits.
Well, I wanted to talk about that. Firstly, just that on that first group, there's a huge spike in children not being able to attend school. So we've kind of found that there's the problem exists, and it's got much worse after the pandemic. So I think that's the first point to make is, because this didn't exist to the same extent before the pandemic, it is partly pandemic related. And I think some of the things that councils are lacking on the front line is support for social workers, support for investment in mental health services, support for things that's going to actually help get those children into school. And that's what we're hearing is actually a bit more capacity here would help. I think on the wider point, are there people who perhaps do deserve that punishment? The thing I would say is, it's the way it's been framed. I think Ryan used the word threat. I think you talked about punishment. It's kind of punitive. What you actually want to get is some effect that helps get the child into school. If the social worker says that's what needs to happen, that's a separate argument. If the education secretary says this is what we need to do on a large scale, that's a completely different kettle of fish.
Ryan, I can see you're itching to get involved there. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing. I think the benefits system in the UK is generally ungenerous relative to other European countries. If you come out of work, your income does drop, and your so-called replacement rate is very poor. But I think the way to get better support for more increased benefits is to make sure that there's more conditionality around benefits and that there's more contributory elements. So if you've paid more into the system before, you get more out of it. That's the route to getting a more generous social security system.
OK, Devon, final word to you. I mean, do you acknowledge that some parents, frankly, are lazy and not making sure their kids go to school and it is their fault?
I mean, I grew up on a council estate. You did see things like that happen. Do I think taking money away from that family would have made a difference? No, it wouldn't have. Okay. I think that what they need is some help and support to figure out what's going wrong and to turn their lives around.
Look, both of you, thank you very much. Short and sweet, but I think we got to the points there. Great stuff. Right, Ryan Shorthouse there, who is, of course, Chief Executive Anchor of Conservative think tank Bright Blue, and Devon Galani, Director of Policy in Practice.